Netanyahu, Aaron, is still supposed to testify in trial tomorrow. His trial has not yet been canceled, although, as you correctly said, that is de facto what he's requesting. Netanyahu, more than anything else, has once again thrown a big, flaming hot wrench into the Israeli political system. And his statement today and his letter and his lawyer's 111-page submission to the president of Israel are as much political, a kind of defiant political statement as a legal effort. Let me explain why that is. Under the law of the State of Israel, in order to be pardoned, you have to be a convicted criminal. That is the current law. The president, in fact, doesn't really have the ability to pardon anyone who is not a convicted criminal. And Netanyahu not only is trying to prevent his trial from going to term and for there to be any verdict, but has been trying de facto to cancel his trial, as you alluded to, for even longer than this war. His efforts to cancel this judgment began at least a year before the war, when he was reelected to power and launched what has been called the reform of the administration of the state, his so-called judicial reform, kind of civilian coup d'etat to change the balance of power between the judiciary, the executive, and the legislation in Israel. That is what we're seeing. So Netanyahu has not accepted any responsibility for any of the crimes of which he's accused. And in fact, his letter submitted to the president of Israel, which is a required phase, you have to personally request a pardon in Israel, does not ask for pardon. The word pardon isn't listed there. So we are going to have to take a step back and see how the president responds and how the legal system responds, because the president, though he is the titular head of state, doesn't have absolute power. There's still a system through which requests for pardons have to go, and Netanyahu has a long way to go before I believe we will see any real resolution following this very dramatic request announced today.
So it sounds like, Noga, that a lot of things have to fall into place in order for him to be eligible, so to speak, for pardoning. But as we wait for that to happen, I mean, if all of those things do happen, rather, what are his chances, in your view, of his being pardoned?
So this is the, million-dollar question right now. To what extent has Netanyahu already submitted the institutions of the Israeli state after many years of an effort to take over the levers of power? To what extent has he already succeeded? There were some indications today in the initial reaction that appeared coordinated with Netanyahu's request, the reaction from the president of the state, who said, and I'm quoting, that he will take very seriously, that he will seriously examine this request. The president, of course, had the ability from the first minute to say, this is not an actual request for pardon. It doesn't mention pardon. The prime minister isn't taking responsibility. I'll wait and see what else he does. The president left it understood that he will take this request seriously. So we may actually see a complete about face and a precedent in which the prime minister, in fact, is determined not to be subject to the rule of law in Israel. That is what Netanyahu is asking, and that is what the entire population of Israel is now waiting to see. There are already protests on the street in front of the president's home demanding that he reject this outright. There is a tremendous amount of concern, and the leader of the Democrat Party, the Labor Party in Israel, has already said, quoting President Trump, that only someone guilty requests a pardon. I mention this because Netanyahu provided two reasons for this request in a videotape statement he made today. In one, he said that he was making this request so as to give peace to the people of Israel. He said it was his own interest to pursue the trial and to prove his innocence, but the people of Israel need a respite. The second reason he gave is that he said President Trump has already requested that he be pardoned, and so he is respecting that request. That is the very precipice where things stand right now. And I think we're going to have to wait to see how legal matters develop over the next few days before we can really gauge what Netanyahu's chances are to annul his corruption trial that has threatened his rule on power.